Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Can we get serious now?
One thing that did happen during the 60s was some music of an unusual or experimental nature did get recorded and did get released. Now look at who the executives were in those companies at those times. Not hip young guys. These were cigar-chomping old guys who looked at the product that came and said, I don't know. Who knows what it is? Record it, stick it out. If it sells, all right. We were better off with those guys than we are now with the supposedly hip young executives who are making the decisions of what people should see and hear in the marketplace.
Success in the music business begins with a dream, a vision. This podcast will give you, the listener, the insight and tools to turn that vision into a reality. Meet the industry professionals who work day by day behind the scenes, helping to make those dreams come true. Welcome to the business side of music.
In the studio with us today, three-time Grammy nominee David Chesky, who's earned great respect for his fresh and unique approach to musical compositions which span the jazz and classical genres. As a composer of orchestral works, operas, and ballets, an author of children's books, a jazz pianist, and a world-renowned innovator of audio technologies, Chesky redefines the role of the modern-day Renaissance man. Critics describe his music as highly individualistic, memorable, dynamic, and exotic. Chesky developed his own style of composition, heralded as urban orchestral. I actually like that. I think it's kind of a cool title. Music merging classical techniques with sounds emanating from the streets of New York. This style produced genre-bending works, including his rap symphony, we're going to have to dig into that one, and concertos for electric guitar, violin, and cello. Chesky's ballets, including Hope, commissioned and toured by Alvin Ailey's American Dance Theater, reflects the modern life in a fast city. His distinctive sound has attracted numerous accolades, including the prestigious Lancaster Symphony Composer Award. Chesky has received nominations from the Independent Music Awards for his recordings of the Venetian concertos and the Spanish poems. He's also served as a composer in residence for the National Symphony of Taiwan. He's committed to fostering music education in young children, fully aware that our audiences of tomorrow depend on being introduced to classical music today. And I got to tell you, that is a sweet spot for me too. He's also the author of The Snow Bears of Lake Louise, a book that educates children about the importance of preserving the environment. He's a Miami native who moved to New York in 1974 to officially begin his career as a musician, studying composition with Pulitzer Prize winner David Deltrici and piano with one of my favorite people, John Lewis of the Modern Jazz Quartet. David, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Glad to have you here. When we got your bio and your press kit, you definitely are truly a Renaissance man. But then we talk about your record label, too, which is Chesky Records. This all kind of started back, I guess, about 1978? You had a career in Columbia Records at that time. You were a bit frustrated with the lack of artistic control.
Well, a few things happened. I was on Columbia Records, and I had my big band, and, you know, it was a big corporate structure, and you had to do things a certain way, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But at the same time, I used to be a conductor in New York for studios. You know, this was, I think, the Star Wars thing was going on, so I was a young guy, and I got a lot of this work that John Williams didn't do for TVs, you know, it was that big thing. And then I started getting really interested in sound because I would conduct. Where I stood on the orchestra platform, it sounded great, but, you know, they had 50, 60 microphones for the orchestra, and when I would listen to the mix, it would always sound funny. So I wanted to start a label, and I had this idea to start a label from a conductor's perspective, one-point miking, and that is the basis of Chesky Records. Was born in the studio then. The idea is that it's real musicians in a real space. We're not trying to do compression, equalization, and all that, which is valid if you want to make music in a board like a pop music like Madonna, but what we wanted to do was capture real musicians in a real space from a single point microphone stereo, because you have two ears, and we wanted to emulate that, and that is how the idea was born.
So when you started the record, label, when you started Chesky Records, did you have a particular idea or direction that you were going to head in order to find artists that you were going to sign to the roster? Who was your first artist?
Our direction was acoustic music. Like I said, real musicians in a real space. Our first, we started reissuing tapes for about 6 months just to make some money, but our first real artist was Bucky Pizzarelli and Johnny Frigo live in Studio A, RCA Studio A, and it's a beautiful studio. And I think on that date, John Pizzarelli, his son, played. And this was when John was first starting out. Butch Miles was on drums. Ron Carter was on bass.
Right.
That was our first recording session, and we did it with a C24 stereo microphone, and that was it.
Just one microphone in the studio.
Yes, and we would put the musicians around the one microphone,
wow.
And we make them balance their sound. Our philosophy is, when you listen to a recording, it's a magic trick. There's two speakers in front of you. There's no people there, but when you close your eyes, we want to create the illusion that band is in your home. That's our philosophy. Think of it like restaurants. Some restaurants are French, Italian, Chinese. Well, our philosophy as our French little restaurant is real musicians in a real space.
When you talk about balancing the acts in the studio, you really, I guess, you're moving the musicians forwards and backwards or off to one side. How did you get that balance process to sound the way it did?
We just adjust the distances from the musicians to the microphone, and we also tell the guy, like in an orchestra, you're playing too loud, you're playing too soft, you're playing too loud, you're playing too soft, and we balance it. And, it takes a minute, but guys who play jazz get it in, 10 minutes, we figure it out. But that's the way it was always done and should be. When we had multi-miking, people started to get lazy. Everybody's isolated in a different booth. People are playing on the record at different times in different cities. That's not what we're about. Like I said, I'm not going to judge anybody. If they want to do it, it's fine. But our thing is organic. It's real people in a real space that are having, a dialogue between them in real time. So, and that's, we want to capture it. Like we're taking a beautiful black and white photo. That's what it is, no airbrushing.
You're putting musicians in the same room that actually have not only the opportunity and the ability to work off one another, but really start to feed off one another as they're performing and really kind of integrate themselves into each other, I would assume.
Yes, that's what happens. Look, to us, the entire world is a string quartet. There has to be the interaction. If you put people in a real space, there's interaction. Look, I have my own jazz group too, and you have that interaction, and that's what makes it nice. It's a different thing, and this was the way it was done in the 20s, 30s, 40s, etc. When we got to the 70s, when we started multi-miking, things started becoming different. Not to say that it was bad or worse, it was just different. With the fusion and all that, everything got isolated, and it was a different sound that people went for. But we want to be purists.
Do you find that when you get musicians in the room, one style, one genre works better than the other? I mean, you mentioned jazz. Can you accomplish the same thing with, say, classical environment or maybe acoustic folk music? I'm assuming there's a couple genres that wouldn't work in this particular formula, and there's probably some that work better than others.
Right. Think of it like this. It's not really the music, it's the acoustic things. If you have a guy singing in front of Led Zeppelin, that's not going to balance naturally. If you had a guy like Frank Sinatra singing in front of a big band, in reality, when the singer sings, you wouldn't hear the singer, so you need a vocal mic. And so it sounds, so on things like that, you have to use a vocal mic. But anything that balances naturally, like a jazz group, string quartet, orchestra, can be done like this. Now, when we do a vocalist, we can put the vocalist really, really, really close to the microphone, and then that's how we can get them louder. And the band's a little farther back.
And mixing, I mean, are you mixing as you're recording, or is there any fine-tuning or tweaking afterwards?
No, there's no mixing because it is what it is. It's printed live to 2-track. There's nothing we can do. Now, look, we take 2 takes of the song or 3 takes because if somebody blows letter B, we can edit it in. If you have a great take and the guy made a mistake, we can always, we take a few and, one of the tracks would be good takes and we do that. But we don't sit there and start equalizing, editing, punching in and punching out. It's all it's all live in real time.
To record a song in the studio, I mean, you said it. This is something that goes back to what they did back in really the early days of one microphone in a room and everybody kind of working around it. This concept's not original, but it sounds like you've really fine-tuned it.
Well, what we've done is we've taken this concept and we kicked it up because we recorded 190, 224. We pioneered all these high data rates, sampling rates. So we do the best equipment. So we're taking this idea, but doing it with ultra high resolution microphones, A to D converters, microphone preamps, so it is the most transparent thing. We're trying to put a clear window between you and the musicians. We're not mixing it, coloring it, EQ. It is what it is. When you hear it, that's it.
And this is why the record label has really earned, Chesky Records has earned the reputation of just being something that high-end audiophiles would appreciate, right?
Exactly. That's our thing. You know what I mean? Look, other labels are known for dance records and other labels are known for whatever. And our label has always been known for this organic type, live to 2-track, real-time music. That's what we do.
Again, we're going to go ahead and take a break, get a word in for our sponsors. And when we get back, I want to chat with David in regards to one of the things I came across was this headphone series versus the speakers and how you've developed that. I guess it's a Binaural Plus series. And we'll talk about that a little bit when we come back. In the studio with us today, David Chesky, head of Chesky Records out of New York. And you're listening to this edition of...
Hi, this is Alex Heike, and you are listening to The Business Side of Music.
You're listening to The Business Side of Music.
Hey, it's Chris SD from Sync Songwriter. Imagine what it would be like getting your music into the latest TV shows, movies, or ads. Your songs would not only get exposure in front of millions of viewers, you'd get paid to do it, and gain a reputation as the songwriter that you are. I've been showing songwriters, composers, and artists how to get their music into TV and film for over 15 years. Collectively, they have generated hundreds of thousands of dollars from licensing their music. Their music has been on networks such as HBO, Bravo, ABC, NBC, Netflix, and more. In films or trailers such as Predator, Annihilation, Christmas Chronicles, Professor Mac, and many others. So many songwriters upload their music to websites hoping to get discovered. Unfortunately, this almost never happens with the millions of songs out there competing for attention. I show you how to get your music heard by the people who can actually make it happen for you. When you start getting your music licensed, you automatically develop a reputation in the industry. This lets you get syncs over and over again. If you'd like to discover how to connect with the right people in music licensing, just click the Sync Songwriter logo on the Business Side of Music webpage, and I'll see you there.
Hi, this is Vinny Rebus, the founder of Indie Connect. Our goal is to ensure that you have the knowledge, the tools, skills, resources, and connections that you need to develop a profitable and long-lasting career in music. One way we do this is through these Business Side of Music podcasts. I'd also like to invite you to check out Indie Connect magazine, our free multimedia online publication packed with practical interviews and advice from music industry experts. Go to www.indieconnectmag.com. That's www.indieconnectmag.com. Let us walk with you and guide you every step of your musical journey.
You're listening to The Business Side of Music.
Hey, we're back in the studio. You're listening to another edition of The Business Side of Music. Here with us today over the phone, David Chesky out of New York, head of Chesky Records. We're talking about, and I consider myself to a certain extent, an audiophile. I really like having, the best speakers in my house, the good turntable. I'm a vinyl guy. My wife and I are both vinyl people. But, and because the music business has so compressed, or maybe I should say the music business has compressed music so much that we're really losing that three-dimensional sound. And it sounds like something you're coming back with. What I do like when I was reading some of your articles on your website, you talk about the Binaural Plus series, and you I don't know how else to put this. You have a binaural head, which is what you call a dummy head with specially calibrated microphones where the ears would be. How did this come about?
Okay, here's how it came about. I have a friend of mine, Edgar, who is a physicist at Princeton University, runs the physics engineering lab there. And we decided, since he's, it's his lab, he could do whatever he wants, he decided to start looking into 3D modeling. And this has come about not for so much the binaural, but what we can do now is we can do total surround out of 2 speakers. It's a new platform we're doing. We're going to launch it soon. It's based on how the human brain works. We don't hear sound scientifically like a microphone does. There's something called the McGurk effect. Your listeners can go online and type in the McGurk effect. I think it's MCGURK. And what happens with the McGurk effect is this. There's a guy, and he's saying the word ba, 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 ba. And then he says the word ba, ba, ba. And then he says the word ba, but then the camera is showing his lips saying the word ba. But even though he's saying the word ba, his lips are moving in a V fashion, so you would bet your life that he's saying the word ba. As soon as you close your eyes, you hear the word ba. Because as humans, we're hardwired that the eye trumps the ear. So if the eye says it's a V, the ear gets turned off. We don't hear like that. Now, when we hear music in real life, we can do spatial cues because, we've been on this earth for like 100 million years, and we're so highly developed for spatial cues because, you'd be in the forest 10,000 years ago and you'd hear a twig break and you would say, oh, there's a bear 100 meters behind me on the right, and you would say, I'm going to run, whatever. We can really spatially locate great as people. Now, here's how we spatially locate. If I hear a drum and it's coming from the left side, it hits my left ear, and it's got to go around my nose to hit the right ear. 2 things happen, okay? The first thing that happens is it travels a longer distance, so there's a longer time. And the second thing happens, the longer it travels, the sound, the lower the volume is. Mm-hmm. So the brain calculates spatial cues by volume and timing, okay?
Right.
When we hear speakers, we have something called interaural crosstalk corruption, because what is happening then is the left ear is hearing the left speaker and the right speaker at the same time. And the right ear is hearing the right speaker and the left speaker at the same time. And the brain is saying, what in the world is going on here? The brain is saying something is not right. And so this is why when you hear a normal stereo, you hear it in a 60-degree triangle. Now, what happens in reality is the music is around you, but you cannot hear it. Okay, it's there like the McGurk effect, but the brain is saying it's not there. But in essence, coming from behind you and everywhere. So what Edgar's developed at Princeton with this technology called Bach is crosstalk filters. So we're able to cancel out the right wave and when it launches against the left wave. This way, the left ear only hears the left speaker, the right ear only hears the right speaker, and then you can hear 360 degrees. Now, when you combine this with binaural, then you get all the pinnacle. So we, in 2 speakers, can put you in a virtual 3-dimensional sound field. Now, remember this, 5.1 recordings are just like a hula hoop. You're surrounded, but there's no density to the surround. It's not like spherical balls. So with this technology, we can put you in spherical balls with heights and put you in a real cube. I know it's a lot of information to hear fast, but since it's a podcast, people can play it and figure it out. But when you play the binaural on headphones, you don't have this problem because the headphone is isolated. The left ear only hears the left speaker and the right only hears the right headphone speaker. So binaural, you don't feel like the sound is coming from in your head outside. Now the binaural plus is where we put the filter in there. You can hear the same thing on a speaker.
So in other words, it's much like what you said, a hula hoop, but now it's just really splaying a whole assortment of hula hoops all around your ears. So it gives that depth. I guess that's about the best way I can describe it because that's really how I conceptualize it.
Right, but you think of this as 5.1 is 5 speakers and a hula hoop 10 feet away. But think of this as spherical balls that start at 1 inch 2 inches, 3 inches, 4 inches, and you can put sound anywhere in the spheres. So you can have a sound an inch from your ear, 5 feet from your ear, and 50 feet from your ear. With 5.1, that's only in that sphere, only in the circle, like a ring of Saturn,
Right.
you know?
Right.
So this is a much better way to do it. And hopefully we can launch this thing and it will start changing the way people hear music. Now, look, it doesn't mean the music is going to be any better. Think of it like this. We can watch Star Wars on our iPhone, and we could see the movie and the story is still the movie and the story. And then you can watch Star Wars on a 70 millimeter giant or IMAX movie screen. It's the same exact movie, but the experiences are totally different. And that's what we can do with this. We can put you, in the future, we'll put you in a virtual club or concert hall. So if you're living in Tahiti and you want to go to the Village Vanguard, we could put you in that space.
How far away are you from this being out there was my first question. And then my second question is, on what type of a platform is this going to be? Is it digital? Is it analog, vinyl? How does this going to work?
It has to be digital, and we're ready to launch it soon. We have everything in place. We're testing. We're doing it. We're going to launch it soon, but it has to be digital because we need the DSP to do all the, calculations.
Right. And so the platform will be in a digital world. I'm assuming it'll be through a WAV format or an MP3 format, or how will it be delivered?
Well, we'll deliver it whatever we deliver the file, whether it be WAV or FLAC. It'll be delivered. Whatever file comes to you, once it hits your computer, it's going to turn to PCM, and then that's when we do it. So it's going to be just a regular digital PCM.
Wow. Yeah, that's definitely some technology that's over my head, but I'm so intrigued by it. I can't wait for this to happen. So definitely keep us in mind when this is going to be out there. Talking about Chesky Records, and I was going through your artist roster. Now, anybody that knows me knows I'm a huge jazz buff. So when I start seeing people like Larry Coryell and, of course, John Pizzarelli and John Hammond and a lot of these great artists, how did you find them and got them on your record label?
I kind of just knew most of them, from forever. I mean, I started out as a jazz pianist. These were kind of just people I knew, grew up with. I mean, I used to see Red Rodney all the time. Just, the thing, there used to be a place in New York called the China Song. It was a Chinese restaurant. In the days of record dates, people would just sit there and eat and hang out till the next record date. So you'd meet everybody there. You just knew everybody, and, one thing leads to the other.
Well, we're going to take another break, get another word in for one of our sponsors, and then I want to jump around to a couple other things. Being an author of The Snow Bears of Lake Louise, I want to talk about that a little bit, and then I want to talk about something I think is really cool, which is you talked about music education in young children. We've lost a lot of that from the schools. So when we come back, we'll touch on a couple of those things. In the studio with us today, 3-time Grammy nominee David Chesky, the head of Chesky Records out of New York. Definitely these guys are on cutting edge when it comes to where music has been and, of course, where it's going to be heading. And you're listening to this edition of...
Hey, everybody. This is John Schneider, and you are listening to my good buddy Bob Bender right here on the business side of music. Why wouldn't you be? You're smart.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Wow, I just joined the Music Starts Here community. This is a truly hidden gem for anyone in the music business. Whether you live in Nashville or anywhere else in the world, Music Starts Here is like a GPS for your music career. This is the place to be if you want to get advice and direction from some seriously talented musical people who have been where you want to go. Music news, events, and a great big community with resources for artists, songwriters, musicians, studio and tech, along with music business advice from pros in the industry, all on one site? Make sure you get your free profile now. Go to www.musicstartshere.org. That's musicstartshere.org.
Hi, everyone. I'm Larry Butler, and I want to send you a free digital copy of my new book, The Singer-Songwriter Rulebook. 101 ways to help you improve your chances of success. That's right. Everything you need to know to launch your career as a singer-songwriter, all based on my 40 years in the live performance arena. And believe me, I've seen it all. In my book, you'll find the 10 things you have to deal with before even thinking about becoming a singer-songwriter performer. You'll also learn about the 5 things every singer-songwriter can do this weekend to make their live show better. 5 things I can guarantee that you are not doing already. Plus, there's tips on songwriting and staging, photo and video shoots, publishing, merch, dozens of other topics. All written for people who don't particularly like to read. And again, it's free. Just go to the Business Side of Music website homepage and look for my book cover. Click on it, and a free digital copy of my book will be yours. I'm Larry Butler, and I approve of this message. Thanks.
You're listening to the Business Side of Music.
Back in the studio with David Chesky, head of Chesky Records. Listen, I got to tell you, if you are listening to this podcast episode, do your due diligence and listen to some of the artists on their record label, which is Chesky.com, Chesky.com, because they've got a great roster, great lineup. But some of the things that I think are interesting, and I want to start first with, when I was in school, and I think a lot of us in my generation, my age, you had music programs. You know, you would start off in third or fourth grade with the flutophone, and then you'd pick an instrument, or an instrument would be chosen for you. You'd either play in band or orchestra, and then you worked up from there. We don't really have that anymore. So to keep the music education going, what needs to be done today? Because this is something I can tell it's also close to you.
I look at it like farming, you know. If you don't bring in the next generation, you lose them. Now, the thing is this: if you don't get kids involved in jazz and classical, et cetera, by 6 or 7, they're going to just go to pop, you know, and that's it. And it's okay to go to pop, but I think you still need to have a good musical education to appreciate the other things. Some things you need to know a little more to get into. I have a whole thing. I have this thing called Classical Cats. It's a children's introduction to the orchestra. I have my Mice War opera that's playing around the world. It exposes kids to classical music. I think this is very important because, like I said, in the public schools, we just don't have this anymore. You know, when I go to other countries, they spend a fortune on the arts. You know, I just got back the other day. I was in Berlin, and I, went out to dinner with the people in the orchestra. The government subsidizes $330 per seat, I think, in the Berlin Philharmonic, and the orchestras there, to really, get people into this culture. Culture is, not a commodity there. In America, we make it a commodity. It's got to be profitable. There, it's their culture,
Yeah.
And I think here, jazz is not a commodity. Jazz is our indigenous culture that we give to the world. Like if you go to Brazil, they have the samba and bossa nova. And we need to preserve this, and not preserve it because it's a financial thing, but to preserve it because it's American, and it's more. As Einstein used to say, some of the things in life you can count, don't count, and the things you can't count really count. We need, every person in this country should know about our jazz history. And if you don't want to like it afterwards, fine, but you need to know about Duke Ellington, Fats Waller, Coltrane, et cetera, because that's our heritage as an American society. This is what we gave to the world, and we need to preserve it. And we also need to continue that line. I'm trying to do that also in classical music, take my jazz background and use it to create syncopated music. In classical music, it's very structured. It's not syncopated. They're very good at playing ba-ba-ba-ba-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. They can't play da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da like a jazz group. So the idea is to try to fuse this music and make classical music new, because art has to reflect time and culture. Classical music is great, but it was written 200 years ago for a king sitting on a throne 6,000 miles away. We have really amazingly talented people in this country, and we need to create our own indigenous voice in jazz and classical music and expose it to the world, and also get young people into it. When I go to Brazil, it's very interesting. They have these things called samba schools, and the samba school is not only a musical thing, it's the center of the community. And it would be great in this country if in orchestras on the weekends kids would go and hang out and take lessons, and the family would go, and it would be like an anchor point, like a social center.
I'm glad you brought that up, because when I went to Europe in 1990, my first trip over there, I remember sitting in my hotel room wondering why people were making all this noise down in the piazza out by the fountains, and it's because they get out and they socialize. They're not tied up watching television or sitting on their computers. They're actually getting out and socializing and listening to music and conversing. At the same time, my dad, me growing up as a child, my dad instilled in me listening to all styles and all genres of music. So yes, I was a Jimi Hendrix fan. I was a Grand Funk Railroad fan. I was a Chicago fan. My dad, begrudgingly, I think, was okay with that, but he also wanted to make sure that I listened to Glenn Miller and Benny Goodman and Tommy Dorsey. And he would also play pipe organ music for me, or he'd play Hawaiian music for me, or play like Brazilian music for me. He wanted to make sure I was well-rounded, and I'm thankful that he did that. And I believe that those are the two things we got to do. We got to get away from the television. We got to get our faces out of the iPads and the smartphones, and we've got to start communicating with other people and start learning all kinds of music, not just pop that's on the radio, because it's really much more broad and deeper than that, and especially jazz, because it is the one genre of music that this country can claim as their own.
You are absolutely 10,000% correct. I couldn't agree more.
So, Chesky Records, you're out there. You've got a lot of artists on your roster. You're also, like I said, you're an author of a book that you wrote called The Snow Bears of Lake Louise. What is that book about? I mean, let me back up here. So, first of all, you talked about the Mice War. You also, and you talked about classical cats and children's ballet. You've done that. And you're also an author of a book. So how did that come about?
I write my own librettos. So The Mice War is a story I wrote and I orchestrated for orchestra to be a children's opera. The Zephyrtine is a ballet that starts to go on tour this year with the Russian National Ballet in Europe. And it's a story I wrote, and then I made it into a ballet. Because I want to have these magical things for children, like modern nutcrackers, to get them into it. The Snow Bears is a ballet that I wrote, but I adapted it to a book. And it's about these bears that teach children about the environment. You know, they clean the air, they clean the water, they clean the earth. So it's a fun way to get kids into music, and it's a fun way to get them aware of these things. The Mice War teaches children the absurdity of war. The Snow Bears teaches children about, the environment. The Zephyrtine Ballet teaches social acceptance. So they all have underlying things they can discuss with their parents.
Talking about your record label, Chesky Records has produced over 500 albums, and your genres are spanning classical, jazz, and world music. How can people find your music? Where can they find it and listen to it?
Well, we're on, I guess, Spotify. We're on our sister company, HD Tracks, where you can hear it in high definition downloads. And you can go to our website, chesky.com, and order any of the CDs or from Amazon. So it's available on all those platforms.
David, thank you so much for being on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, and I really appreciate it.
Don't forget to check out our affiliates, including Lab Canna, fine hemp products since 2014. Click on their link on our website for more information and how to order their product line. If you're interested in getting your music into film or television, click on the Sync Songwriter link on our website. Absolutely the best way to get your songs listened to by top TV and film music supervisors. This is how you can get your songs quickly licensed for your favorite TV shows and movies. Click on our website link to get a free digital copy of Larry Butler's new rule book for singers and songwriters, 101 Ways to Help Improve Your Chances of Success. Also, check out our other affiliate, Music Starts Here. You can find them at musicstartshere.org. Probably the best one-stop shop for the singer, songwriter, or aspiring musician who's relocating to Nashville or wants to. Last but not least, shameless plug for this podcast. Become a YouTube subscriber by going to the Business Side of Music page. You can hear all of our released episodes there. Also, check out our website at businesssideofmusic.com. Follow us on Facebook at the Business Side of Music Podcast and on Twitter at Biz Side of Music.
The Business Side of Music is the creation of Tom Sabella and Tracy Snow and is produced by Bob Bender. The Business Side of Music is recorded at Music Dog Studios in Los Angeles, California and Nashville, Tennessee. Production sound design by Keith Stark. Voiceover and promo by Lisa Fuson.